All right, sweet. Good evening. Welcome back. If you're new here, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully, you find this informative. Um, going to try to make this a quick overview just so we have a general understanding of how we got here. This is part one. Part two, we're going to look at specific legislation um, and initiatives and whatnot that were written that came by way of all this. But first, I think it's important that we just kind of all understand where it all comes from because I seen, on Twitter, a bunch of people were mentioning MacArthur Foundation and basically just singling them out. And I was, starting to got curious and was wondering, is there more to this? So got to looking, and boy, is there. Boy, is there. Almost $1 billion has been put into social justice in North Carolina. Some estimates have it as high as $800 million in total has been put in just for that cause. So how we got here, how our modern society, and more specifically our state, North Carolina, has been shaped by progressive think tanks, billionaire-funded grant-making foundations, and donor-advised funds, with nonprofits in the state pulling in millions over the years. What has it done? So we're going to get a general background first. So again, just to have a general understanding of it all. And this beginning stuff is important to note. So 20th century mega wealth. Private fortunes were harnessed for social reform on an unprecedented institutionalized scale. Z. Smith Reynolds, or ZSR, Winston-Salem, began in 1936 with $7.8 million. Which today is worth $181.8 million. Interesting story, actually, if you're into, I guess, just crime stuff. Interesting backstory on the Z. Smith Reynolds there. You should look it up if you're interested in stuff like that. Civil rights inspired philanthropy. The civil rights era has seen foundations shift from the global development aspirations of the post-World War II era to causes closer to home, you could say. So in the 20s and 30s, it was really a focus on medicine, growing medicine, making medicine more available. And then around the 40s and 50s, it was more of just like global development. So then it moved to civil rights and social justice, you could say. Now, I mentioned ZSR a second ago, and it's key to note here one small aspect of the Reynolds reach here. The original fortune of Reynolds Tobacco led to the establishment of pivotal foundations. They are important to mention for the fact without Reynolds' fortune, ARCA Foundation would not exist. Jane Bagley Lehman, daughter of Nancy Susan Reynolds Bagley, served as president and board member for ARCA. Lehman, using her own wealth, gave seed money to Drummond Pike to create Tides Foundation. Stay with me here. Okay, leveraging the 501c3 for profit. Here's a picture of Drummond Pike. And this was from the 2024 DAF report done by the National Philanthropic Trust. It says there is an estimated $251.52 billion with a B in DAF charitable assets, $1.48 trillion in private foundation assets estimated for 2023. I would imagine that it has at least gone up from there. But you could go check out the 2024 DAF report if you're interested in learning more on that. Again, this is a general overview, but this is important to mention here. So Drummond Pike and Tides diverged from traditional foundations by scaling DAFs, pioneering fiscal sponsorships, prioritizing donor anonymity, which is very important, and blending nonprofit and for-profit activities. This transformed the 501c3s into flexible, revenue-generating intermediaries that amplify ideological impacts while allowing for anonymity. Again, mentioning that because that is the key part. Pike's journey is a turning point showing how nonprofits now operate as business-like entities in the $251 billion DAF sector, far beyond the regional transparent models of foundations of yesteryear. And so what I'm saying here is Drummond Pike figured out a way that he could take basically a sleepy machine and leverage it for insane wealth, because there's some IRS benefits to DAFs over GMFs. But in a nutshell, now this is a very, very broad overview here, but this is essentially the process here. Control, though, is no longer solely owned by our government. Progressive billionaires, grant-making foundations or GMFs, and trusts fund think tanks to research policy ideas, which shape advocacy and influence federal/state policies. Intermediaries use donor-advised funds, DAFs, and fiscal sponsorships to channel funds to regional state nonprofits for implementation, leveraging the 501c3 status for anonymity and efficiency. This enables out-of-state and national donors to influence in-state policy and civic action, often with reduced transparency compared to traditional foundations. So again, the anonymous part there. This allows money really from anywhere to come in here, and then just a DAF entity, really Tides, but Tides is everywhere. They have like 7 operational or 8 operational hubs, and they're in the GMF side, the DAF side, and all kinds of stuff. Tides is pretty wild. But again, this allows people to put money in here, and instead of having to put their face and their name on a donation to a cause, they can do it through the DAF, and the DAF makes the donation or makes the grant. So just to look at a couple of the foundations, and I'll have a list of more foundations here in a second. Again, this is not every foundation that operates on the national level or in North Carolina. However, these are some of the big dogs, the big fish. So this is Open Society Foundations. This was the one that I'm surprised they weren't mentioned nowhere near as much as MacArthur was around crime in Charlotte. But so this is Open Society. This was started by George Soros, chaired now by Alex Soros. As you see here, there's 3 Soroses here, and then 3 people who aren't even in America at all. However, this is one of the most powerful foundations moving money in North Carolina. They're the biggest funders for the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, the NAACP, the ACLU, Forward Justice, and the Justice Center. Lots of money, and this is their mission. The Open Society Foundations champion the search for bold, democratic solutions to our urgent common challenges that advance rights, equity, and justice. Shout out HB 307. We'll probably get more onto that tomorrow. But that is sitting on Stein's desk right now. Big changes if that gets signed. Big changes. But here's a look at the MacArthur Foundation. I put 3 White Houses up there to show that this is a board that has White House experience. And this is something that's kind of key to think about. Now, the grant-making foundations and the DAFs oftentimes have board members or trustees who have worked for the White House in some kind of way or directly underneath presidents. And then once they come out of that, job with the president during that term, then they come in to these foundations, and it's more or less like a revolving door, if you will. But, here I just posted more of the board members for the MacArthur Foundation. I couldn't really fit their pictures in here. But again, we've got O.I. Olopade. He was a board member, or rather he is a board member. And he was a National Advisory Board member for Obama. Got another Obama appointee in here, Mariko Silver, Deputy Assistant International Policy, Department of Homeland for Obama. And then I feel like we had one more here. Yes, Alonda Nelson, board member, Deputy Assistant to Biden, Deputy Cab Secretary for Gender Policy. Now, again, I didn't mention on the last slide, but it was on there, so you've seen it. Total assets for MacArthur, I believe to be around $8.67 billion, and they have invested at least $4.1 million. I'd probably lean towards more. And here's a look at ZSR, or the Z Smith Reynolds Foundation. Total assets. This number is actually like kind of all over the place, but we're going to go with 330 million. They have invested over $500 million in North Carolina. And just in 2025, they plan to put out 108 grants worth $19 million. They're a big funder of the Coalition to End Homelessness, Southern Coalition for Southern Justice. You'll see them a lot. They also fund the University of North Carolina System Racial Equity Task Force. Again, shout out HB 307, which, you know, if you read HB 307, and we'll look at it on part 2 of this, which is going to come a whole lot faster than this did. But HB 307, the state is allocating over $1 million to a Chapel Hill think tank to approach this stuff. So as you see, it's just it's a little money, a little club of money, you know. But here's another look at some more foundations who operate in North Carolina, also nationally. And this isn't a complete list, but these are just some big key foundations. Most of these guys have at least over $100 million in endowment. Foundation for the Carolinas, Tides Again, Duke Energy, Ford Foundation, Public Welfare Foundation, Borealis Philanthropy, W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Annie E. Casey Foundation. Shout out NPR. You hear that on there a lot, right? Arnold Ventures, Sardinia Foundation, Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Pew Charitable Trust, and there's a lot more. Now I put the pyramid there upside down because it's really to show how all this massive wealth gets focused down to a very fine point. This is a very well-oiled machine, and there's really not many conservative foundations or DAFs out there that are countering this. So, I mean, it's really just like a one-way street, and all they have to do is just keep putting the money in, trying new things. But I put here, foundations operate mostly as a research to policy pipeline. Notice the revolving door between foundations and federal positions, including previously holding public office. This is one indicator as to the nature of how society has had such an immense shift. Many foundations cite 2020 as the catalyst for investing in social reform. From the foundations, endowments are dispatched to research social injustices. This is where think tanks come into the process. Badass picture, you know what I'm saying? Think tanks are organized that, or rather, are organizations that conduct research, generate policy recommendations, and advocate for evidence-based solutions to complex social, economic, and political issues. Think tanks serve as intellectual hubs that bridge funding from GMFs and DAFs, policy implementations by governments, and on-the-ground action by community leaders / nonprofits. They produce data-driven reports, toolkits, and briefs that influence legislation and executive actions. And again, if you read HB 307, you'll see that's exactly what I'm talking about. North Carolina is funding them, the think tank at Chapel Hill, and they're going to come up with a new report on criminal reform. Here's a closer look at some of the think tanks operating, obviously nationally, but who have contributed to initiatives and legislation that is happening in North Carolina. Center for American Progress, they're funded by Tides, Open Society, many others as well. Aspen Institute, they're funded by Open Society and Ford Foundation. And I highlighted all these here, so even on a quick look, you can see there's kind of two key players here, the blue and the gray. But Vera Institute, funded by MacArthur and Open Society. And those are really our two key players, but all of these guys are. Urban Institute, funded by MacArthur and Arnold Ventures. Brennan Center for Justice, funded by Open Society and MacArthur. Justice Policy Institute, funded by MacArthur and Open Society. Council on Criminal Justice, funded by MacArthur and Arnold Ventures. Sentencing Project, funded by Open Society and Ford Foundation. Prison Policy Institute, funded by Tides and Borealis. And the Economic Policy Institute, funded by Ford and Open Society. And again, these aren't even all of them. There are literally thousands of these. But just, I'm highlighting some ones who like really have a real impact on not only legislation, but initiatives. Here's a look at some of the CEO and presidents or directors of these think tanks. These are just for the different ones here. Center for American Progress is Neera Tanden. Urban Institute is Sarah Rosen Wartell. Aspen Institute is Dan Porterfield, and boy, does he look happy. Brennan Center for Justice is Michael Walden. Vera Institute of Justice is Nicholas Turner. Justice Policy Institute is Jasmine L. Tyler. Council on Criminal Justice, Adam Gelb. The Sentencing Project, Kara Gosh. Prison Policy Initiative, Peter Wagner. And I want to say his picture might be like 30 years old. But there's not many pictures of this guy, and I can't confirm that the picture that might be more recent is actually him. Neither here nor there. Economic Policy Institute, Heidi Sherholz, chief economist of U.S. Department of Labor under Obama. And these were some of the key think tanks that we just highlighted. Now, here's a quick look at some of the DAFs. And this is their either CEO or presidents. And then Cyprus, they have a movement-led advisory board. And they do this weird thing where they don't put anybody's eyes in pictures. But a quick look at these DAFs. And there's more than this, but just to kind of highlight them. Both DAFs and GMFs invest in research and nonprofits. The main differences being GMFs are typically much larger endowments with board-controlled strategies. DAFs are accounts managed by the organizations. Control is with the organization, which is the DAF, though donor input is considered on grant direction. Lastly, GMFs are required per the IRS to distribute 5% of assets annually, roughly. DAFs have no requirements for distribution, so they can do what they call warehouse the wealth. So there's definitely some pros and cons to both of them. Now, this data comes from reports from Inside Philanthropy, Instrumental, ProPublica, GMF websites, Cause IQ, NCDPS, and then specifically the OJJDP, OJP.gov website. And I want to say that there is probably more money out there, but there is so much that is, even in just the last 5 years, that has gone on with these organizations, not even counting the last 10 years. Because these organizations have been going on. As I said, many cite 2020. That's really just kind of their virtue signal to just let everybody else know like what their MO is. Because many of them have been involved specifically in North Carolina for a long time before 2020. And I'd like to say this number is probably more than 82 million, but this is what I could tally up. So, flex my Excel skills, created this badass piece here. But as you see, there's a heavy concentration on the top four, really the top two, but we'll say top four. And I highlighted the Southern Coalition for Southern Justice. I have them getting upwards of 20 million, maybe more in money. And they represent 24% of this pie, which is crazy. And they are in, I think they're in Raleigh. I might have them backwards right now. But I know they operate in Charlotte hardcore. Here's a greater look at more of the nonprofits. I'm not going to highlight and read everyone, but you got it there on the screen. And specifically, I'm looking only at the organizations in the money trail as it relates to social justice, criminal reform, homelessness. So again, there are so many more nonprofits operating in the state. But here's a look at it. So here's a little closer look at the top 4 nonprofits in North Carolina in terms of grant money received. And this is Forward Justice, ACLU, the Justice Center, and the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. Together, these 4 organizations receive 67% of grant money in the state. Their focus areas are criminal reform, racial justice, voting rights, reentry, prosecutorial reform, bail reform, jail reduction. You get the gist. Here's the leaders of Forward Justice, the founders, if you will. Daryl V. Atkinson left, co-founder, co-director. Caitlin Swain in the center, co-founder, co-director. Dr. Ashley Marshall Wright, co-founder, deputy director. Deborah Archer, she's the board president for the ACLU National Charter. She says, each and every time they leave the house, I am terrified. It is not enough for me to pray that the world will be kind. I need to fight for my children, for everyone's children. That is why am I here. That is why the ACLU exists, to build a better future for my sons and for all of us. And the reason I highlighted this quote here is many of you are aware that these organizations and the money from these organizations have one goal in mind. So I just feel like this is a very loaded statement. And who knows exactly how deep that statement really is, with her and how she reflects that to her children. But anyways, North Carolina Justice Center, they just recently had their director step down, Reggie Shuford. But I wanted to highlight, they have a large board, but just wanted to highlight the members with government experience. Chris Brook, he was former NC Court of Appeals judge, appointed by Roy Cooper. Also, NC legal director, civil rights attorney. Robin E. Hudson, former NC Supreme Court Justice, 2007, 2022. And she was also the first woman elected without an appointment and Court of Appeals judge, 2001 and 2006. David Price, former U.S. representative for NC4, 1987 to 1994 and 1997 to 2022. Terry Van Doon, former NC State Senator, 3 terms, served on Pisgah Legal Services Board, advocating against cuts to underserved programs. Again, powerful organization here. And again, this is just an overview of the organizations and the money. And here in a second, we're going to take a look at how this has helped or not helped North Carolina and our key cities. But here's the big kahuna. And these are really the 4 key players here with these guys. The Southern Coalition for Social Justice. This is the Justice System Reform Team. That is, as you see there. And they use pronouns. But Dominic Ernie, Tanita Holmes, Janky Canaria, Jake Sussman. These are the 4 who, when they get their piece of the 24% of the pie, they are the ones that are trying to implement the social justice programs here in North Carolina. Now, you ask yourself how they're doing. Charlotte crime data. This comes from the neighborhoodscout.com. Charlotte, 100 being the safest, they got a 3, which means they are safer than 3% of U.S. cities. Raleigh, 8% of U.S. cities. Durham, 3% of U.S. cities. Greensboro, 3% of U.S. cities. Fayetteville, 5% of U.S. cities. Oh, yeah, let me throw this up there real quick. Again, so I really do appreciate you guys reaching out to me, actually, and using this Hushline thing. That's pretty sick. Going to get to that, and I've been emailing you guys back. Did have a major passing in the family, which kind of set everything back by a few days. But we're getting back on it. So wanted to get this out, this video here. Again, this is a quick overview, basically, of just how we got here. How does it happen? The who's, the hows, how much. And this is part 1. In part 2, we're going to look at the key legislation, not only from the White House, but from our state, who wrote it, who signed it, what they say about it, and what programs or initiatives came out of that. But yeah, so this is just the overview here. Part 1, part 2 coming. And again, shout out HB 307. We are going to cover that on part 2. because it's still waiting to be signed as of 10 hours ago. I haven't seen anything new on that yet. But if that gets signed, that is a game changer in the state. Big game changer. But yeah, so for the channel and everything, this was part 1 of how we got here. North Carolina is a hotbed for social justice, and there has been a lot of focus here in North Carolina, key focus in North Carolina. Now, I implore you to check out the organizations I listed here. These are kind of the big fish here, but there's other people and other organizations who definitely have an impact as well. But it's worth checking out. Shout out Influence Watch and shout out Cause IQ. Those 2 websites were immensely helpful in research for this. But yeah, not to just sit here on the end of it for too long. How we got here, part 1, part 2 coming. And that is that. I appreciate you and see you on the next episode.